All right, guys, let's go ahead and head back to our seat, please. Head back to our seat.
Oh yeah, whatever. I completely forgot it was Monday, so there's plenty of time.
All right. I think I saw Miss Hack end up getting Garrett over here, right? He completed one. Garrett, too easy on Miss Hack there. But everybody else, I mean, we saw the challenges, right? Of trying to instruct somebody on how to tie their shoe without being able to show them how to tie their shoes. So that's really just a reflection of how much or how often we use observational learning in our daily lives, right? If you can imagine a world without observational learning, how difficult would that be? It'd be extremely difficult, right? Whenever you're coming into, trying to pick up on a new skill, a new task, a new ability, trying to complete something, maybe at work, maybe something here at school, right? What do? We want somebody to show us how to do it first, right? We observe somebody doing it, and that's how a lot of times that's what we learn, okay? So observational learning is quite a bit different from, the other aspects of learning that we've looked at so far. With this particular chapter. Classical conditioning, operant conditioning, that's all behaviorism, okay? So with our initial definition of learning, it is a relatively permanent change in behavior. Today we're going to move away from that a little bit. We're going to focus more on cognitive psychology, which is where observational learning is more likely to fall underneath. Sound good? So you guys remember your original definitions of what is learning when you said something about the acquisition of knowledge, new knowledge. You guys use that definition over and over and over again. That's what we're really going to focus on today with our study on learning. Move away from Skinner and Pavlov, those type of things. Sound good? All right. Let's go ahead and go back to our bell work real quick. Insight and latent learning. Now, insight and latent learning are really transitioning from the concept of operant conditioning to cognitive psychology and observational learning. So, what's our definition of latent learning? Ms. Nora?
It's learning by watching.
Learning by watching is latent learning? Learning by watching would be observational learning. So, see what else we have for our definition of latent learning. Jason?
I said learning without physical repetitions of it.
Okay, without physical repetitions, that's fine. I'm looking for something else though. Ms. Blakes?
Knowledge that is only apparent when a person has something to display it.
Okay, an incentive, right? An incentive to display it. So there's learning going on, knowledge, your terminology here, but it's not necessarily exemplified or exhibited until that incentive shows up, okay? So what this does is it kind of contradicts B.F. Skinner's ideas of we have to have reinforcement in order for us to learn anything, okay? Reinforcement or punishment in order for us to acquire new behaviors. So there's this guy named Tolman. You want to write his name down? I think it's Tolman. And he did an experiment with 3 groups of mice over the course of 21 days. 3 groups, 21 days. Maybe write that outside of latent learning. Okay? What he did with the first group of mice over the course of that 21 days, they would run through this maze, and at the end of the maze, what would they have? Waiting for them, cheese, right? So they had reinforcement at the end of the maze every single day. Okay? Second group of mice, they ran through the maze for 21 days, each and every day. At the end of the maze, what did they get? Nothing. Right? So nothing's there for that second group of mice. And then that third group of mice, for the first 10 days, they ran through the maze. They get to the end, nothing's there. Right? Day 11 is the key day. You may write that down. On day 11, and in the subsequent days thereafter, all the way up to day 21, they get cheese, right? At the end of from day 11 on, which group 1, group 2, group 3, outperformed the other 2 groups? Was it group 1, the one that got cheese every day, group 2, the group that never got cheese, or group 3, the ones that got cheese only after day 11, or day 11 thereafter? Group 3. Okay, so Tolman looks at this, does some critical thinking and saying, hey, what's going on over the first 11 days how are they able to, on day 11, just all of a sudden flip the switch and they're outperforming the other two groups? They can't just, show up one day, right? They must have been doing something prior to day 11. So all those days that they weren't getting reinforced, they weren't performing at a high level, but were they learning? Yeah, they were, right? They were learning the whole time. So latent learning is kind of like the dream of all high school teachers, maybe even, all teachers in education. Sometimes in class, students don't necessarily perform or exhibit that they have an understanding of what we're doing inside the classroom, and sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating to a teacher, right? You teach, and you just ain't getting it, right? Not performing to the ability that we'd like you to perform. So from our mindset, it's just a little latent learning going on here. You're not exactly exhibiting it, but later on in life, there's going to be a point where you get in a situation where you have to utilize the skills that you acquired inside the classroom, and our mentality is that light switch, it's going to flip on, and you're going to be able to exhibit what you learned here in a high school classroom, right? And that's going to give us a sense of accomplishment and a feel good feeling there, okay? We'll get you some other examples of latent learning here in a second. But one thing, you may want to write this out to the side, and I'll highlight it in our notes a little bit later. But what does this do? It challenges the ideas of B.F. Skinner. Okay, B.F. Skinner is saying there is no free will, right? There's no free will. That everything that you do is contingent upon reinforcement. And specifically, learning can't take place without any type of reinforcement. This shows that learning can take place without reinforcement, right? We don't have to give you a gold star every time you do something or to bait you into, doing something to have any reinforcement hanging over your head, okay? The second one, insight learning. What is that? Job?
Isn't it like a light bulb moment, like you aren't actually doing it, and then out of the blue you figure out how to do it?
Good. So you've challenged yourself, you flex your mental muscles, you're struggling, it's so overwhelming, you walk away from it, right? You're sitting off to the side, 2 hours later, you're doing something completely different from the original task, and then boom, an idea comes to you, and then you go back at it again, okay? So it's kind of like what we did on Friday, but we'd have to change up the scenario. So you did the record playing stuff. Say that you spent the entirety of the class period working on that and you never got it. Couldn't figure it out, right? You go away from it. We didn't go over the answers or anything like that in class. And some other time during this weekend, you weren't doing anything necessarily related to the record playing and stuff, but boom, an idea came to you, right? And then you go back at it, get the materials back out, and you try something else again. That would be insight learning, okay? For example, I was thinking about something. Things didn't work out well in my global culture classes last Friday, right? And I was doing something else completely different on Saturday morning, and for some reason it was just bam. It was like, don't do that schedule next time around, right? Make sure you mix up the schedule prior to, if you switch the lessons, or if I would have switched the lessons around, it would have worked out a lot better than what it did, right? And so next time around, I'll make that change, right? I wasn't even thinking about the event, but all of a sudden it came to me, right? The idea came to me. That would be insight learning there. You've been in a situation where, I know the most awkward one and embarrassing for me is conversation. I can't think of the person's name, right? They come up to me. I've had students come in, I had them in class last year, and they'll walk in and they'll say, man, I had such a good time. Global culture, I really miss being in here, and I have no idea who they are. I know who their face is, but I can't remember their name. So I'm trying to circumvent this awkward scenario, trying to get them out of the classroom as quickly as possible without them knowing that I can't remember what their name is. And then, later on in the day, what will happen? The name will come to me. I wish I knew that, 2 hours ago. That would have made it a little bit easier of a conversation that way. So that's insight learning. All right, let's go ahead and get to our notes today. We got a few things to attack. So no word of the day today. So cognitive learning. Again, this is different from the behaviorist approach to learning. You remember with behaviorism, always like the scenario of how do they approach a child at birth? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neither good nor bad? A behavior says what about a child at birth? What, Job? They're all evil? Well, a psychoanalyst would say that they're all evil, right? Freud would say that they're all evil, right? Because they're only born with the id, the selfish desires of the id, okay? So behaviorism is one of the other two. Neither good nor bad, or good. What would a behaviorist say about a child at birth? Yes, they're neither good nor bad. They are only the result of the environment that they're born into, the stimuli that they're exposed to with classical conditioning, right? Or the reinforcements that they've been exposed to with applications of B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning there, okay? So we're going away from that, and we're talking more about cognitive psychology today. We're going to analyze insight's effect on learning. Maybe at the end of class I'll give you another brain teaser, kind of like what Mr. Glick did on Friday, but a little bit different, to see if we can make more application of insight, evaluate the necessity of reinforcement. That's latent learning in Tolman, and then describe how humans learn through observation learning in Albert Bandura. Right? So we've already kind of hit on Bandura with observational learning at the very beginning of the semester when we were talking about psych perspectives. So what are the cognitive processes? This is a test question. I've mentioned a few already that we missed. Negative reinforcement, everybody gets that one wrong because everybody thinks negative reinforcement is punishment. Negative reinforcement is a good thing. Give me negative reinforcement. We talked about schedules of reinforcement, how students miss those. And then another one that's most commonly missed on the test that we'll have on Wednesday is cognitive processes. What are the cognitive processes? They're simply thinking, our perceptions and sensations and perceptions right here. He's smelling. Senses. That's part of the cognitive processes. Language is a big part of cognitive processes. And this right here, attentiveness or attention is a cognitive process as well. Think about cognitive processes, we're thinking about the forebrain, right? So that's your cerebrum, not your cerebellum, your cerebrum or your cerebral cortex, your frontal lobe. That's where our cognitive processes are taking place, okay? So we already talked about insight, but the guy who came up with the idea of insight is a guy named Wolfgang Kohler. And how did he do it? He was doing an observation of monkeys in a cage, and their reinforcement was bananas. And he observed them to, look like they were putting forth quite a bit of effort to get the bananas, and then they fail, and then we just go off to the side, right? And they would do something completely different, not related to the bananas at all. And then, an hour later, it would seem as if, an idea came to them, and they get back at it again. They try to attack, the scenario, get the bananas, that failed again. They go do something else. An hour later, boom, like the light bulb went off in their head, and they, eventually finally get it with a new idea, okay? Latent learning, another great example of latent learning is cursive writing. Who writes cursively? Right, we got Miss Barwell. It's usually about 5% or less than 5%, right, of the class. I had one person last hour, my first hour, writes cursive writing as well, okay? Why don't we write with cursive writing? What don't we do?
Makes you think.
What's that?
It makes you think harder.
Makes you think. We don't want to flex our mental muscles that way.
It's never really pushed
It's
off.
never pushed. From the perspective of Skinner, is there any incentive, right, to write in cursive? Not so much, so you don't. But if we incentivize it, could you? Or if I forced you to, or I asked you to. So for example, like the next slide, if I asked you to write in cursive writing, do you think that you could? That's going to be the challenge. The next slide, any note that you write down needs to be in cursive writing just to show that we have it latent visibility inside of us, and we can if forced to, okay? For me, I only use cursive writing. I mean, I got a little bit of a variation of it, half print, half cursive. But for the most part, the only time I use cursive is when I sign my name, right? And a lot of times I'm signing my name on a no. No. Is that what you do? Another baseball. Get my, you gotta get practice in. No. Where am I signing my name? On checks, right? I'm signing them on checks, and that means that there's money involved with it, right? There's some type of incentive associated with it. So that's why I do it. Okay. So let's see if you can do it on this next slide, whatever next slide it would be. All right. So again, we had Tolman here. Oh, bummer. There we go. Back at it. So you can write Tolman's name down. Edward Tolman. See if you can write in cursive. So he's the guy that came up with the concept of latent learning. You got the mice in the maze, like we talked about with our bell work. 21 days. Day 11, the third group of mice started receiving reinforcement. It shows that over the first 11 days they were learning, even though that they weren't necessarily exhibiting that they learned something. Sound good? So it challenges the idea of B.F. Skinner. Everybody got, it looks like a J. Remember? It looks like a J. Yeah. Yeah. I heard a while ago that they were talking about getting rid of cursive writing in the elementary system, and then I had a conversation with somebody else and said, well, they can't do that because it's actually a state mandated. That is.
We got to be able to read it too. Involved
Yeah.
with writing it. I mean, it's still around to read a lot more.
Yep, that is true. All right, so it challenges B.F. Skinner. All right, getting to something different. So this is insight learning, latent learning. It's really like a transition from behaviorism to cognitive psychology. And this is really all cognitive here with observational learning. Okay, so we talked about Bandura, the bubble doll experiment. You guys remember that? At the beginning of this semester. That's observational learning going on there. Same thing here with this idea of the modeling effect. Okay, if you want to successfully teach somebody a new skill, a new behavior, following the modeling effect is a great way to accomplish that. Okay, it's a 4-step process and it's very simple. And some people think, well, it's too simple. It's so simple. I'm not even going to do it. Okay, when you don't do it, then you're not as successful in your efforts there. The first step is I'm going to do it. You don't do anything. You just sit back and you observe me as I do it. And that's one of the first problems with the modeling effect is nobody wants to take the time to just sit back and watch. They want to dive in sometimes, right? And that's where they get into trouble. They start doing something without an understanding of it. So the second step, I'm going to do it, and then you're going to help me do it. And then the third step, we're going to change roles. You're going to take more responsibility. You're going to do it, and I'm going to watch you do it. And then the fourth step, you're going to do it. Or I'll help you do it in the third step. The fourth step, I'm just going to sit back and observe you completing it on your own. So you have independence there. Okay. So you have the example of like teaching a kid to ride a bike. You know, sometimes parents, first thing that they do is put them on there and send them, right? It's kind of a problem, right? They haven't even observed the behavior in and of itself. So if you want it to be more successful, you have to show them first, you know, the process, and then have them, you know, talk and think about what are you doing while you are riding the bike there as well, and then change roles that way. That would make the process quite a bit easier and a little bit more successful there. Okay, there's a guy. Most of you guys are so familiar with him because of the Pyramid of Success. Yeah. John Wooden, right? May want to put John Wooden out to the side. So, even more than the Pyramid of Success, he's known for using this to teach basketball to his players. Okay, he's very successful. You can't argue against what he did because of how many championships he's won. He won more He's won more championships and basketball championships than anybody else. Okay, so there's something that he did was right. Okay, so the first thing that he would do to establish the modeling effect and how he would coach was he would teach his players, these are grown men, how to put their socks on. Right? So he's kind of an old man in himself. You know, got these college students, college guys sitting around. You're gonna first step, watch me put my socks on. Right? Now I'm gonna put my socks on and you talk me through the process. And then you're gonna put your socks on, I'll talk you through the process, and now you're gonna put your socks on and I'm just gonna watch you. Why do you think he used socks? I mean, it's basic, it's very simple to introduce this idea. What's so important about socks and basketball players? Somebody said earlier today they wanted to make sure he looked cool.
You get blisters. You don't
Exactly,
wear them.
blisters. If you don't put your socks on the right way, you get blisters. If you get blisters, can you practice? No, can't practice and you can't play. You can't get better. Okay, so that's why he did that first, so that they could avoid that scenario there. Okay, but then in anything else, how to shoot a left, how to shoot a shot, you know, how to play defense. What does he do? He does it this way, uses this modeling effect to introduce all of those ideas. Sound good? And they became really, really successful. So sometimes I think that we are unaware of how often this is used. This is used all the time. What are subject areas that this is used in? Yeah, Ms. Hack? Math class,
Like
right?
terrifying.
Exactly. So, Mr. Stromberger, Ms. Willie, put it up there on the board, right? You watch me do it. I'm going to do another one. Now you walk me through the step. Now you're going to do it. You're going to take responsibility. I'll help you. And now here's some homework assignments. You're going to do it independently, right? It's a challenge on your own. Ms. Farron?
What happens to your brain when you like unlearn something? Like when you learn how to ride a bike, you really can't learn how to ride a bike unless something happens to your brain. Like people having to do therapy to learn how to walk again. But like, what happened with something like that where?
Where you have to learn how to walk again?
Yeah, like.
Well, a lot of that's based off of damage to that particular part of the brain, you know, because of the stroke,
Yeah.
right?
But like, I guess with the bike, how do you go from not knowing how to do it at all to you just know how to do it right away? Now, after you get on the bike, you don't have to ride it for like years.
You remember we talked about your substantia nigra, which contains unconscious motor functions, so that particular task is ingrained and held and stored in that particular part of your brain, so that when you go back to riding your bike again, you don't have to relearn it all over again. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that would be like memories that are motor aspect of memories. You remember HM, the guy that had his hippocampus removed, right? So they figured out that there was a difference between declarative memory and motor memory, right? Based off of some of the tasks that they did, right? He was able to, his motor aspects was held in a different part of the brain than the hippocampus, and so those things he was getting better at, right? Though the declarative memory, it wasn't, because that's the hippocampus stuff, right? So it's a different part of the brain, right? You remember Mr. Glick, he talked about 3 different ways in which our memories start to deteriorate, right? Because of a lack of neuronal connections, deterioration. Maybe we learned something else that circumvents that and has replaced it, covers it up, and so we don't use that other memory like we did in the past. You know what I mean? So there are other examples. You can think about classical conditioning and extinction, right? So extinction takes place because you classically conditioned yourself to go past that previous behavior. Okay? Think about other subject areas real quick. Think about art class, right? How often does Mr. Wells use the modeling effect? I'm going to do it, right? You're going to watch me do it, okay? Think about physics or chemistry class with all the labs, or biology, all the labs that you do, right? We're going to model it first, then you're going to attack it. Think about Coach Donor at Davenport, all the little kids that he's got, right? He's going to try to teach them how to do certain types of physical skills. He doesn't just toss a bunch of basketballs out there and say, go at it, right? You know, figure it out. No, he's going to model the skill first, right, before you ever do it on your own. So if you want to be successful as an educator, as a teacher, whatever it may be, think about using the model in effect, because sometimes we try to do it other ways, and we lack success there. All right, the eliciting effect. So this is a variation of cognitive learning. So you get in a situation that you don't know what to do. You've never been in this environment before. You're unfamiliar with the context. So what do you do in that situation? Any ideas? Yeah? You do what everybody else does. You watch, you observe, observational learning. Whatever you see somebody else doing, then that's what you're going to do, okay? Scenario, my cousin was a Catholic family. I didn't grow up Catholic, and so I'd never been to the Catholic church before. Never been to Mass before. One weekend I went and stayed with him. I was like in middle school at the time. No idea what the rules are when you go to Mass, right? So what did I do whenever I was there? Whatever he did, I was doing the same thing. Had no idea what I was doing, but if he did it, I was doing it as well. Sound good? I had a student, I shared that example with them, and he said, hey, I've actually done this before. He went to the Apostolic Church, and he brought his girlfriend to church one time, and he knew that she wasn't familiar with what went on at the Apostolic Church, so he decided to have some fun with it. He just started randomly doing things, not things that they normally do on a regular service day. He just started randomly doing stuff, and he just wanted to see if she would follow him. And you know what she did? She did exactly what he did. Right? He was a funny guy. I'm not sure if the relationship lasted all that long, but he had fun that one day. All right, the disinhibitory effect. Let's actually do it this way. Let's change the order. I think it's easier if we look at this one first. Inhibitory effect. Sometimes with observational learning, we don't have to have bad things happen to us for us to learn. We can observe it in others, and then our behavior change. It inhibits our behavior. Example here, if you're driving down the interstate, and you see somebody else get pulled over by a police officer, what do? Yeah, it inhibits your behavior, your bad behavior. It inhibits your speeding. So you see somebody else get punished, and then you change your behavior subsequently. You know, you growing up, you have your siblings. They get punished for doing something, you know, don't do that, right? That inhibits your own behavior because you observed it in them. Happens in the classroom as well. I can remember growing up in elementary school, there's one kid who didn't do what he did because he always got in trouble. Always got in trouble, right? It got to the point, that teacher would probably get fired today if they did that, but what they did was they pulled him out, almost tried to shame him into behaving appropriately. But they put everybody's desks out here, put his here, and they built like a fence around him to separate him from the rest of the class. Telling us, communicating to us, don't do what he does, right? Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Inhibitory effect, okay? Disinhibitory effect. So this is the opposite. Instead of decreasing behavior, this actually increases behavior through observational learning. You may want to write that out to the side. Increases behavior through observational learning. So you have once learned that you should not do yada yada yada. However, you come across somebody that knows, that has been through the same process that you have been, that knows that they should not do yada yada yada, and you trust them, right? You have a strong respect for them and a relationship with them, and they do what they weren't supposed to do. They violate the rule, right? Because you have so much trust and so much respect in them, what does that do for you? You're observing them violating the rule? It must be all right. So you violate the rule as well, okay? So the example that I have in mind was the DARE program. You guys remember the DARE program? So we got exposed to the DARE program like 6th grade. And so everybody knows rules, right? Concerning drugs, alcohol, smoking, tobacco, right? We all got exposed to the same program. We're all on the same page. However, after the DARE program, it's like we had an influx of drug use and tobacco and drinking, right, thereafter. It's like, what in the world's going on? I thought the DARE program was supposed to have success and not, create the opposite. And so what was going on was students were seeing people violate the rule, and they trusted them. They knew that they were going through the same. The disinhibitory effect took over. And what's even worse with this, what's even stronger with this, is if it's a sibling right? If you have a sibling, you've grown up in the same environment at home, right? You know that your parents have told you these are the rules. And your sibling, who you trust, you've got a strong relationship with, they violate the rule, you see them violate the rule, it must be alright then for you to violate the rule there as well. Okay? That happens all the time. Ms. Barwell?
An example of that be like when you're going into a class in the beginning of the school year and you talk to like students who have been in that class the previous year and they tell you like you don't have to do these assignments, we're gonna grade them, or you don't have to study for that test because that one's not hard.
Yep.
Like, they're the same thing.
That's a very good example there. Yep, a very good example there. So, you know, a lot of times I think about, you know, things that happen. I mean, there's other reasons for why adolescents have a tendency to make some irrational decisions. We talked about, you know, you not using your prefrontal cortex and resulting to your amygdala, right? So the easiest thing to do is just observe people that you trust that are around you, and if they do it and they're all right, then you assume that you can do it and you're going to be all right. So it's a disinhibitory effect there. Sound good? All right. We got just a moment here before we run out of time. Maybe you have to watch this on your own, but the classroom website. Learning. I got one last video. It's over here. It says, "Can you solve the riddle?" Uh-oh.
Wish you had a battery that lasted longer than lunch.
Logged out.
Yeah.
Order up. It's switching time. There, that's switched down to 12 hours of battery life. Switch to home.
Oh, we did. I know the answer.
Taking that internship in a remote mountain lab might not have been the best idea. Pulling that lever with the skull symbol just to see what it did probably wasn't so smart either. But now is not the time for regrets, because you need to get away from these mutant zombies fast. With you are the janitor, the lab assistant, and the old professor. You've gotten a head start, but there's only one way to safety. Across an old rope bridge spanning a massive gorge. You can dash across in a minute, while the lab assistant takes 2 minutes. The janitor is a bit slower and needs 5 minutes, and the professor takes a whole 10 minutes, holding onto the ropes every step of the way. By the professor's calculations, the zombies will catch up to you in just over 17 minutes. So you only have that much time to get everyone across and cut the ropes. Unfortunately, the bridge can only hold 2 people at a time. To make matters worse, it's so dark out that you can barely see, and the old lantern you grabbed on your way only illuminates a tiny area. Can you figure out a way to have everyone escape in time?
Alright, so essentially, you gotta get everybody across in 17 minutes. You can only have 2 people going across at the same time, and you have to take the longer speed, longer time of the 2 people when you do cross. Sound good? So I know that Miss Willie uses it in her math classes. She stole it from me. Maybe vice versa, I don't know. But try to think about it, and the idea here is that you flex your mental muscles and then you walk away from it, come up with a different idea, flex your mental muscles, walk away from it, see if we get some insight learning going on here. Sound good? We'll talk about it at the beginning of class tomorrow.
Report to the main office.
Miss Nora, you get the last
Also,
one.
reminder t-shirts to put the recycling out.
You guys have a good rest of the day. Appreciate your attention this morning.
Our group forgot to print out the.
Can you give me a hard copy by the end of the day?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
That's gonna
Yep.
Adios.
Yep.
When do you think would be the best time to come take the test?
So Thursday's an all-day thing. You're gone all day Thursday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday is an all-day thing. You're
Yeah.
gone all day,
It
right?
might. We usually get back in the middle of advisory, so yeah, I would say no.
Okay. You could possibly do it as soon as you get back if you'd like. You could do a Thursday before school, or Thursday during advisory.
Okay.
Sound good?
So,